Good morning. I'm coming to you today from the Cumberland bunker, and today's video is going to be a little different. Got a lot of things that have been on my mind of late, and that really has to do with why do our leaders treat us like chumps? Why do they make decisions and treat us like a bunch of imbeciles, like we really don't know what's going on? So one example is student loan debt forgiveness. I guess on its surface, I can understand why some people would be excited about that, but what about all of the people that paid off their loans? People that made conscious decisions to take on these loans and then paid them off, and only to find that a whole bunch of other people get their loans forgiven by the government, which of course means that the cost is transferred to all of us, the taxpayers. So one way to think about it is all of us, all of those that pay taxes anyway, are paying off the loans of these other people. What degrees did they get? What are they doing with all of those degrees? What about the people that decided they didn't want to take on all that debt and instead went to trade schools or went into the military and earned the GI Bill for serving our government for 6 years or longer? And yet people celebrate and say, well, what a great thing to pay off all of this burden and this debt. Why is tuition so expensive in the first place? There's plenty of evidence that indicates that it's in large part because the large flow of money coming from the government. Everybody forgets that the government took over the student loan program. They lumped it in with Obamacare. And so the government took this over, made it much easier for anybody to get a student loan. And colleges saw that easy money. So now by forgiving the debt of these students that took on these loans, we're just making the problem even worse. There's no incentive for colleges to reduce tuitions, and there's no incentive for colleges to be competitive when there's that much money flowing, and now we just made it even worse. So, today's students will say, well, I'll go take a loan and go to school and get whatever degree that I want, no matter whether it's a degree that's going to lead to an actual job or profession, because the government will probably forgive it anyway. And the colleges will say, well, there's no incentive for us to try to be more competitive. There's easy money. All this money's flowing. So why not keep raising tuition? There's no incentive otherwise. So it's just throwing gasoline on the fire. It's not helping the situation at all. It's not going to reduce college costs. So we're all being a bunch of chumps by sitting back and taking it. I'm not unsympathetic for people saddled with student loans that are taking them years and years or decades to pay off. But forgiving them makes a bunch of the rest of us chumps. So maybe some kind of renegotiation, change the interest rate. The interest rates on these loans are extremely high. There's got to be some other way for the government to make it right. And I concede that the government made this mess in the first place. But by forgiving these loans, they make the tuition situation worse, not better, and they make the rest of us out to be chumps. If you want to get a degree in underwater badminton, that's fine with me. I don't care. Just don't ask me to pay for it, is all I'm saying. Another example is electric vehicles. So the government is subsidizing the purchase of electric vehicles because they've decided that that's what they want the market to shift to, rather than letting the market decide. And so, again, we taxpayers are being chumps. We're paying for richer people to buy these electric vehicles at a discount that we're all paying for as taxpayers. I don't particularly want an EV right now, the current technologies being what they are. I don't want to have to worry about, am I going to make it to where I'm going, or run out of juice or what have you, and have to find a charging station and all that kind of stuff. That's my decision. Everybody else has different situations, but why should we, the taxpayer, be subsidizing these $60,000 and $70,000 automobiles if that's not what we want? So for all of you that are taking advantage of that, I harbor no ill will towards you, but the rest of us are being chumps. Think about, most middle class folks, they can't afford a $60,000, $70,000 EV. Whether there's an $8,000 reduction in the price thanks to the government or not, through a subsidy. And it's not practical for a lot of people, particularly in flyover country, where we routinely jump in a car and drive 300 or 400 miles. So we're all just being played for a bunch of chumps again. Another thought about the whole situation with EVs and encouraging us to all start driving electric cars. Has anybody ever really looked into the environmental impacts of constructing these electric vehicles? Have you looked at all of the deep heavy metal mining that has to happen in order to create an electric vehicle? And it takes big machines to do that. Even Elon Musk conceded that for the batteries alone in a Tesla, you have to drive a Tesla 60,000 miles before you have accommodated for the same amount of carbon being produced by a conventional gasoline or internal combustion engine. And that's just for the batteries. So when you factor that in to the rest of the equation, also, when you look at where all these heavy metals are coming from and all the energy required to get them, it makes no sense. If you want an electric vehicle, fine, but pay the full price for it. Don't let the government, don't expect me as a taxpayer to subsidize you. I don't want to be a chump. One other issue about EVs that nobody ever seems to talk about or think about is if everybody in the country suddenly had EVs, our electric grid could not handle it. I mean, in California, within a week, they said they were going to ban internal combustion engine vehicles, while at the same time told Californians who had EVs not to all charge them at night because the grid couldn't handle it. You can't make this stuff up. If you look at the loads required to charge an EV, and we haven't even talked about what about apartment complexes and all of the other places people live, what's required to have EV chargers everywhere. None of it makes any sense. We don't have enough electricity to handle it, and the current administration is pushing solar and wind, which is all well and good, except the wind isn't always blowing and the sun isn't always shining, and it's not on-demand energy. Nuclear would make a whole lot more sense. But we're all just a bunch of chumps. We just sit back and take it. I can't be the only one asking these questions of how are we going to power all these things? How's everybody going to have the ability to charge them? It makes no sense. Another way we're being chumps is the way the news portrays things. This conflict going on in Israel, between Israel and Hamas. What we keep hearing in the West is that we want to help facilitate a two-state solution between Israel and the Palestinians. And the more I study this, the more I realize that is not what the Palestinians want. What the Palestinians want is a one-state solution with no state of Israel. So all of these people shouting from the river to the sea, or supporting Hamas, supporting Palestinians as the oppressed, for example. And that's a longer story, maybe a subject for another day. But what they are really advocating for is the abolition of Israel. Of course, if you're a student of the body, if you're a student of the Bible, you might know that the Israelis, the Hebrews, have been living in that area for over 3,000 years, off and on. They would get conquered and then come back and so forth. That's the whole story of the whole Old Testament. The point is this notion that what we want is peace, we want a two-state solution. Nobody ever seems to ask, what is it that the Palestinians are asking for? They're not asking for a two-state solution. They're asking for a one-state solution, one where Israel doesn't exist. So here we are watching all of these protesters asking for something that the people they're protesting on behalf of don't even believe in or want. They want the eradication of Israel. Ask yourself this question: if Israel disarmed, what would happen? They would be annihilated. If the Palestinians disarmed, what would happen? There'd be peace in the region. Israel's not trying to destroy the Palestinians as long as the Palestinians aren't lobbing rockets and so forth into their country. So it seems to me that once again we are being played for chumps. People are not telling us the full truth. A few more thoughts about Israel and Hamas. I've heard over and over again Gaza described as the world's largest indoor prison. Well, the people in Gaza elected Hamas. Those are the people they chose to lead them. And despite all of that, and the fact that Israel left Gaza to itself, to govern itself, they weren't able to sustain themselves. Much of their food and energy and water came from Israel. And what did Israel get in return for all of that is tunnels everywhere, Hamas hiding under hospitals, lobbing rockets indiscriminately into Israel. Imagine if Mexico or a portion of Mexico decided that, and it's correct, Texas and New Mexico and Arizona and part of California was part of Mexico at one time, that they decided that they wanted to reclaim that and just routinely lobbed rockets into Texas and into Arizona, New Mexico, and California. What would we do? Would we just sit back and take it, or would we do something about it? Well, I think the answer is pretty straightforward. We'd do something about it. And what if, in that case, the Mexicans, their stated goal was the eradication of Americans? Because the stated goal in the charter of Hamas is the eradication of the Jews, not just Israel, but the Jews. So all of the people that have been bought into this Marxist ideology about the oppressed and the oppressor are being played for chumps. They're not looking at the full picture. War is a very ugly and terrible thing. It's made worse when one enemy hides among its populace and leaves the other side no choice but to live with the possibility that there are going to be innocents that are sacrificed in the process, and that's terrible. And I'm no fan of any of that, obviously. I guess all I'm saying is don't be a chump. Educate yourself, look at both sides, expose yourself to sources of information that are not your favorite source or your most comfortable source, because otherwise you're just in an echo chamber and you're just receiving confirmation of what you already believe rather than looking at the full picture. So just a few things to think about. Hope you all have a great day, and let's not be chumps.